Boardroom Bound, episode 146, The Keys to Creating a Personal Roadmap to the Boardroom with Diana Markaki.
Well, I very quickly realized that board career does not just happen automatically, at least not for, young women like myself. I realized that I had to be very intentional and purposeful and work hard and actually have a plan. I put together my personal roadmap to the boardroom, which now I summarize into, 5 key tips.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Diana Markaki, and she is a great example of someone taking their executive career and translating that across into the boardroom. So from her background in international M&A and a capital markets lawyer, she was able to use those to move into a boardroom space that were a perfect fit with hers. And she's become so successful at it, she's now training others on their path to the boardroom. So we'll hear lots of her top tips today, but also what it's like in other parts of the world where she's based out of Switzerland, and so much translate that to wherever you are. It's pretty incredible how it is a small boardroom world after all.
Before we jump into today's show, I'd like to share a message from our sponsor about director certification. Want to join your first board, or are you looking for additional board seat opportunities? In either scenario, be sure to be disciplined in your approach. Now, through the Becoming an Exceptional Board Director Candidate Coaching and Certification course, you get both modern board director candidate packaging and modern board operations knowledge integrated within one program. Remember, the key to landing additional or your first board seat is in your packaging. Make the effort to do it right. Program graduates also receive their globally recognized International Board Director Competency Designation upon course completion. It's designed for individuals and groups. You can learn more at bit.ly/IBDC-D. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/IBCDC-D. And now let's jump into the show.
Diana Markaki, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Hi, Alexander. It's great to be here.
Well, I am delighted to have you on the show today. I would be very honest and say that we don't do enough global episodes, and I would love to do more of them because boardroom stuff happens all over the world, and there's so much we can learn from each other. Best practice happening in different spots. There's great ideas happening everywhere, but many of the same materials and guidance and advice works in so many different places. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show and hearing about what you're doing, but I tend to get ahead of myself. Let's take a step back here. Let's hear about your career and your experiences, and then we'll talk about how that led into the boardroom stuff and the really cool stuff that you're doing today.
Yeah, wonderful. So in terms of my background, I'm an international lawyer. I specialize in M&A and capital markets, mostly in the energy and infrastructure sectors. I'm originally from Greece, from Athens, in case you could not tell from my accent, but I've worked and lived in different countries. So I actually started my career as an international lawyer in New York. That's where I was trained as a lawyer 20 years ago. And then I've worked and lived in London, Athens, Milan, Amsterdam. And then for the past 7 years, I work and live in Zurich, in Switzerland. So that's where I'm based now. And then I decided to move from law to business. So I did my executive MBA at Harvard Business School to sort of smoothen the transition from being a hardcore lawyer, like my friends call me, to be a little bit more business oriented. So I'm not a practicing lawyer anymore, although, once a lawyer, always a lawyer. So for the past few years, I work in business. So it's been 3 years now that I work for a global airline services provider based here at the Zurich airport, where I'm group head of asset management, which means that I'm responsible for the physical assets of the group in more than 300 locations in 60 countries. So I love working with diverse and cross-functional teams. But outside my day job, and that's where my passion really lies, I sit on 2 corporate boards. One is a publicly traded international construction group, They're quite big. They're present in 30 countries. And then the second one is a very exciting one for me. It's a multi-million mutual fund that invests in 5G technology. So it was established under the European Framework on Digital Transformation, and we were assigned the proceeds from the auctioning of the 5G licenses to the telecommunication companies, and now we're reinvesting in 5G technology. So it fits very well with my, VC and corporate finance background, but I'm super excited with the new technology that 5G brings.
Well, that was a very quick run through, Diana. Thank you. And so now that we've established these great credentials that you have as a background and the mindset and the skill set that you bring as a lawyer, let's do a little bit of a translation from where you went. And you sort of joked that now you're more business oriented, less law practicing in some ways. How did that first board seat come about for you?
Well, my first board appointment was actually not planned. So I wish I could, share with you a brilliant strategy that I had behind it. I did not pursue it. It was part of a proxy battle that one of the investors in the listed company actually initiated. So I had the possibility to experience firsthand for the first time how a very robust and transparent recruitment process for a diverse board of directors actually take place, because it was required in order to get, the support from proxy advisors like Glass Lewis and ISS. So that's how I was, brought on board. So they just needed an international M&A lawyer with experience in construction. I was a perfect fit. So that was my first board appointment.
Well, we were sort of joking about it here that you weren't seeking a board seat, but it sounded like your reputation preceded you, right? And it's something we talk about in this show a lot of. You have to have a platform. You have to be a position of authority, an expert in one or more things. And when that fits with a board, that becomes an opportunity. And it sounds like that was the case for you. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. That's how I see my first board appointment as well. It's completely different than my second one, but I think that was what actually got me to that first board assignment.
And so let's contrast that. So tell us about the second one.
Well, I very quickly realized that, board career does not just happen automatically, at least not for, young women like myself at the time. I realized that I had to be, very intentional and purposeful and, work hard and actually have a plan. So, I put together my, let's say personal, roadmap to the boardroom, which now I summarize into, 5, key tips for, all the, younger or aspiring directors that I actually work with. So basically, I started by, trying to build my curriculum. I knew very well that, I had no CEO experience. And, as you know, most boards, seek that, CEO experience. But then I realized that, my best bet was to have a very specific, unique, marketable skill that was of use to the board. So I actually started, building on that, specific, expertise. And in my case was, my legal background, combined with my, MBA and business acumen, focused on, sectors like energy and infrastructure. So I was working very well on building a reputation and get, on that specific, marketable skill. And then I continued by, doing a very, authentic self-assessment, which can be very tough because, most of the time, we don't want to be brutally honest with ourselves. But I started asking myself, what do I bring to the party? So, which are the companies that I actually could add value to? So I started, shortlisting, different industries, different companies, and then, being very honest about, the specific value that I would bring to those boards. And then I started putting everything together in a, 1-2-page document, which is today my, corporate board profile or, my board CV or, board biography. And that was very difficult, to be honest, because I think, at least for me at the time, it was very difficult to actually look at my job, my work experience, and translate it into very specific skills that are of use to the boards. But that 2-page document actually allowed me to reach out to my network, to the specific, companies that I had identified and truly believed that I could actually add value to their board. So that took me to the next step where I actually started working my network. So I started, approaching people within my network, working on my elevator pitch and explaining to them the specific value that I could bring into a specific company. And that's how my second board appointment actually came about. It was very specific. I was very specific about the company, the industry, and the value that I would be bringing to that specific board. And to be honest, my second board experience is much more rewarding than my first one because I know exactly what I'm bringing to the table, and my fellow directors also know when to come to me to seek specific advice. So I'm enjoying it much more.
It's really interesting with the way you describe it, and it sounds like such a logical approach that I don't think people do often enough. I'll just use a simple analogy. Instead of taking a shotgun approach where you're generally going out and going, I want to be in a board, which is so broad, I don't think anybody can help. You've much more of sort of like the sniper laser focused approach of like, these are specific companies where I know that I am a direct fit because of X, Y, and Z. And now I can go use my network. And if you go to someone and they're not a direct fit to get you into those organizations, that's okay, right? You've actually known what has come out of those conversations, but you've been able to be very focused and tailored and use your precious time very well. And clearly it has literally paid off for you landing one of those board seats. Is that the same advice you would give to everyone, or do you think that's only applicable to people that perhaps already have a very specific brand and reputation?
Well, I think I was trying to fill a gap that I felt that I had. I felt that maybe I was not the obvious board candidate. So I felt that I had to work a little bit harder to actually make that a little bit more obvious, if I may say. As I said in the beginning, I mean, I was lacking the number one quality that boards seek most of the time, which is CEO experience. So I felt that I had to do a little bit more of, soul searching and authentic self-assessment, and then start filling my gaps in order to make myself a good board candidate. So I think that that's the reason why I took the long approach. But I found it very rewarding, so I would say that I recommend it to everyone. If not for anything else, just for them to enjoy their board experience much more. I think I found it very rewarding because I knew exactly that I was bringing a very specific skill set to the specific company. So I went in with a very a specific self-confidence, so to say, and the other fellow directors saw it as well. So I would recommend it for everyone if they have the possibility to do it.
And so, Diana, how has your either mentality or approach changed now that you have two board seats and perhaps are headed towards being a portfolio board member? Is the way you're going about it any different? Or are you doing exactly what you did before? Tell us the way you're approaching things today.
That's a very good question because I was thinking that the other day. I never thought that I would reach the point that I would be turning down, requests to get on a board. Now I say no, more than I say yes. So if I have a recruiter just, calling me up saying, oh, we have a fantastic opportunity for you, it's a listed board based in Norway in the IT sector. I would think you would be a fantastic board. I would say, okay, I don't think I'm a good board candidate. Thank you for calling me. Have a good day. I think, 3-4 years ago, I may have jumped to the opportunity and said yeah, it's a board appointment, any board appointment, I'm going to take it because I think it's going to be the last one. I don't think this way now. I'm very selective. I'm being very strategic about, board opportunities that I'm actually exploring. And, any, additional board appointment I get, it will be a very well thought decision because I know that it's very easy, especially at a young age like I am at, to maybe get burned and ruin your reputation if you just jump in and get the wrong board appointment. So I'm looking for the right board. the one that I feel comfortable with, and I know exactly what I'm bringing. So I'm being more selective. And I'm more cautious of the time investment. In the past, I thought that, board service was just, going through pre-reads and attending 4 board meetings a year. I know very well that that's not the case. There's so much work that, we need to do in between board meetings. You need to, follow the market, ask questions, and especially when you're talking about a new company that you don't run day to day, that's very time consuming. So I'm very, conscious of that time commitment that's needed.
I liked an honest statement that you made in there that you want to be very selective about finding an organization you're a right fit for. Whereas the first one you might have just jumped and taken. I think that's a natural tendency, but I would recommend, even for the first board, you would be better off, and everyone in general, waiting to land your first board. So even if it takes longer, that's a great fit. Because if you do that, what you were implying there, Diana, is you will build a really good reputation, right? You will probably enjoy the experience a lot more. You'll be very much more impressive to the people that are fellow board members working with the board. And then that reputation begins to precede you. It builds a network in some ways for you because the boardroom is such a small space. Once you're in there, everyone who's on a board is probably on other boards or thinking about other boards or talking to people on other boards. And it becomes like that snowball rolling downhill where it kind of builds on itself and adds up more and more. Is that the way that you think and feel about it?
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong. I ended up to be a good fit for my first board appointment, and, I really enjoyed it. But I still think that I should have done more due diligence, and it could have gone really bad. But I was so convinced by the people that approached me that I was the best fit that I didn't take the time to actually double check and confirm myself. So although I was lucky enough that it was a great experience and a great match, I do think that, going forward, I would recommend to everyone, especially even more for their first board appointment, to be very careful and selective, and also do the due diligence. There's so many documentation that nowadays I ask when I'm, exploring a board opportunity. It's more a two-way street. So even that interview, now I ask more questions that, maybe in my first board appointment, I was feeling a bit shy or, not brave enough to ask. So I do recommend, for new or aspiring directors, especially for their first board appointment, to be very careful and do their proper due diligence before they say yes.
And the due diligence is essential, and it can be very different in terms of, say, a public versus a private board, how much is available, how much you can get, and reading everything you can, whether it's the company documents, the internet, investor presentations, all are very helpful. But also the way you talked about it in the interview, right? It's a dialogue. It's almost like dating. Both sides are trying to see, do they want to continue this? And both sides need to figure out whether that's a fit in going forward. So I agree with that. And it sounds like you're doing some coaching and helping of other people as they go through this board process yourself. And I imagine maybe that's where your new opportunity with the boardroom came about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So since I, received my first board appointment when I was not so ready for it, I thought that it was a very good way for me to, give back, especially to, female directors or aspiring directors that are considering a board service as the next step in their career, to make it a little bit easier or, faster than, my second board appointment was. So I spent the past 2 years trying to come up with, a more business-oriented approach to moving the needle on board diversity, which has been my passion since I received my first appointment. So we started by trying to demystify the notion of board readiness. So we started thinking, what does it really mean to be board ready? What does it take for us to actually get there? And most importantly, once we're there, what does it mean for us to be successful? So we built what we call the holistic approach to board readiness. And we did that based on 4 pillars, which now we call the boardroom. And it is a private club of executives working and living in Switzerland who aspire to be board members. And the holistic approach to board readiness basically comes out of a lengthy process that showed us that there's not just one thing that we need to be board ready, even when you are an experienced board member. So the first pillar is executive education. So we have built a tailor-made, very robust 5-module curriculum, which is very specific skill building for board readiness. And this is exclusive for our members. And then we couple that with the practical aspect of board education, which is the board meeting simulations. So we have actually board meetings that are run by, CEOs, experienced board chairs, and board members, and we're using actual business cases. So that's building the self-confidence that I was lacking as a board member during my first board appointment, and people love it because it's very practical, and you see in play exactly what you were taught in the 5 modules. So that's the first pillar that we have in the boardroom. Then the second pillar is executive coaching, which in reality is a combination of leadership development and peer learning. So basically, we have identified the 5 leadership skills that are considered key for board members, and this is completely different than the ones that we have for executives. And when a member joins the boardroom, she's assigned to a group of 8 to 10 women, and that's what we call the inner circle. So that's basically their personal board of directors. That's the group of senior executives that will be working very closely throughout the year to develop those 5 leadership skills. And when we're putting together these groups, we're actually trying to put together very diverse and, dream team board of directors setting. So basically, when a member is assigned to an inner circle, she will find someone from the pharma industry, someone from the banking industry, someone from insurance, and then she will have in the inner circle a CEO, a CFO, a CMO, and she will be working with that dream team board of directors throughout the year. So that's why I say it's a combination of leadership development and peer learning. So that's the second pillar that we have at the boardroom. The third pillar is networking. I mean, that's a big topic for board assignments because, anywhere in Europe, I think, except the UK, only 10% of board assignments, are published or even go through the official route of recruiters and executive search firms. So the rest still go through the so-called whisper networks. So what we're trying to do at the boardroom is actually replicate a positive version of those networks. So networking is everywhere at the boardroom because we bring together CEOs, executives, experienced board members for this building of, deep and long-lasting relationship with a very specific focus with our members. So that's the third pillar. Then the fourth pillar, well, that's my favorite, and I call it inspiration. So inspiration for me at the boardroom is, the role models, this extra shot of inspiration and motivation that we need. Well, at least, me as a woman when I'm operating as the only woman in the room most of the time, to actually not give up and continue pursuing our career goals, even when things get really tough. And sometimes things get tough. So here we have these, role model events, and we have, big speakers from all around the world actually coming to visit us in Zurich at the clubhouse for this fireside type of discussion with our members for this extra sort of inspiration. And I hope you join us one day, Alexander, for this, fireside discussion with our members. We would love that. And all that we will be doing in our private clubhouse. So we are very proud that we will be introducing the first clubhouse in Switzerland, and it's, for the boardroom. So that gives us great joy. So that's a physical location where all the magic is going to happen. If you allow me to say, that's where we're going to do our education, our, coaching, but also our speaking events and networking and, bringing together the ecosystem of supporters, which is helping us move the needle towards board diversity, which is our goal.
Well, Diana, you covered so much there. We could do multiple episodes on all of this. This is fascinating. But let's just back up and make sure everyone understands. So we can all go, oh, Zurich, Switzerland sounds like a beautiful place. Would love to be there. The target audience for the boardroom that you're working with is female executives in Switzerland. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So our members need to be senior women working and living in Switzerland. And by senior, I mean customarily our members are C-level or C-level -1 from large organizations in the country.
And on this show, we are regularly proponents of diversity in the boardroom, and that is a range of things. So, gender is just one, socioeconomic background, global perspective, veteran status. There's all sorts of different aspects that people can bring to the boardroom, add to the conversation. Female is clearly one of those. We know the statistics are very clear. When the boardroom changes from pale, male, and stale and goes in different directions, good things can happen. Sometimes we talk about some of the specifics happening in America, whether it's different laws are encouraging or trends we're seeing. Maybe you can give us an overview of what you're seeing, perhaps in Switzerland and Europe as a larger unit too.
Absolutely, and it's a big topic. Gender quotas, especially on corporate boards, has been a topic in Europe for the past few years, has been implemented in several European countries, and there's a big discussion in Switzerland, which is taking a very soft approach to gender quotas, which is not necessarily wrong. I mean, to be honest, my view on gender quotas has evolved over the years. As a lawyer, I would have liked gender diversity on corporate boards to have evolved in a more organic way rather than through regulation. And also as strong, independent women, we have excelled in the workplace based on merit and hard work. We really want to be sure that we have achieved those board assignments based on merit and ability and not just to check a box. But what I also know is that the historical approach and an assumption that's out there that there is a lack of qualified female leaders to fill corporate board positions is actually not true. Women do not lack merit. What they lack is maybe a close enough resemblance to the prevailing perception of what a leader should look like. So what we need is actually a change in culture and behavior, and that takes time. And the only way to achieve this change in culture and behavior relatively quickly is through critical mass. And in order to achieve critical mass, we need extraordinary temporary measures like gender quotas. So since we have not been fast enough to actually move the needle on board diversity, I think we have no choice but to impose quotas that would lead us to this change a little bit faster. Because if we let social evolution actually take its course, I think in practice we will be sacrificing the next two generations of ambitious and highly competent women to gender roles and stereotypes. So I think that gender quotas are a one-way street at this stage.
Well, I think I would agree with one of your statements there that I would love to see all of this solved, if I use that term, without government intervention. I feel like when the government gets involved, even with the best of intentions, what happens as a result of that is not probably what they designed. So just as an example, a few years ago in California, when they changed the law saying that every public company based in California needed to have a certain percentage of females by XYZ date, and the penalties increased over time as they got towards that, what they saw is that more females were added to boards, but by and large, the vast majority were Caucasian. So they did not actually get the entire diversity they expected. So they passed a new law very recently that said, well, we actually mean other types of diversity as well. It was interesting. So Latinos are 40% of California, but 0.4% of board seats. So the needle was moving, but perhaps not the way they'd originally designed. So I think I'm with you that it can help spur some development, but may not get us exactly where we want to go. But let me step back from there and get your thoughts at a higher level as a female executive who has solved this and overcome some of these problems and concerns historically. And generally, and I realize part of the answer could be join the boardroom, but if you're not based in Switzerland, maybe that's not possible. What should female executives who seek a seat on a corporate board do you think?
I think there are several things that they need to do. Unfortunately, there's not just one thing that's needed, and that's why we had to build something like the boardroom. But I think the first important step is for them to identify that unique and very specific marketable skill such as legal, finance, or operations, that actually is necessary for boards, unless they have CEO experience. But let's be honest, there's not this huge pool of female CEOs to cover the board positions that we need. So I think that that's the first important step. And then continue by being honest with themselves, or do a very authentic, self-assessment and understand exactly where they could bring value. As we discussed earlier, it needs to be a very rewarding board experience in order for this to be, sustainably progressing in a positive way. And this is only done if you know exactly what value you're bringing to a specific company. And then a board CV or a board biography is a door opener. You need to actually put together on a piece of paper those marketable skills that are important for boards and translate your corporate experience into marketable board qualities. And new directors are always faced with this difficulty, but I don't have board experience, but I need to get on a board in order to get board experience. So we're lost in that loop. So we need to actually expand the definition of board experience when we're building our board biography. So, if you have presented to a board like I had as a chief legal officer, or you have sat on nonprofit boards or an association like a legal association or foundations and others, this needs to be interpreted as, enough board experience for a first-time director. And then networking is very important. But for me, you need to move from the superficial transactional networking to actually building deep and long-lasting relationships. Board career does not happen overnight, so it's never too early to start building those relationships, because you are going to need them in the long run, and they should not be transaction, and they should not be one way. So, pay it forward, support others, start building this network that will be of support to you in the future. And I think that the last thing I would say is just, go for it. And I know it sounds simple, but what I mean is a study has shown us that, men apply for jobs when they have, 50% of the qualifications, whereas women apply for jobs only when they have 90% of the qualifications. So we know very well that women do not put themselves forward for board appointments where they could actually bring value. So we always assume that someone else can do it better than us. So I would say to this aspiring female directors, don't assume that someone else can do it better than you. Just go for it.
Well, I love that. As a father of two girls, I love that statistic. And that's very interesting. And I guess I would say as a final question for today, as we try to put a bow on top of this gift that you've given us, there's a bit of a difference between landing the first board seat and perhaps deciding, I want to be a professional board member now, and beginning to expand that out, right? So you have two today. I could see you eventually, this is being your calling card. That's what you do full time as well. Your mindset changes a little bit. The way you go about it changes. The way you talk to people, networking is a little bit different. And I wonder if you've already begun to think about this evolution of how you're going about it.
I mean, it does change you. For me, board service was actually the most rewarding and transformational leadership development. It transformed me as a leader. And at the beginning, it was both what I was bringing back to my day job and vice versa. But it did make me change the way that I think, the way that I approach things, even the way that I present to my own board. So I became a little bit more conscious of that as well. And I understood that, it's very different, to run, a company or a division or a function day to day than taking a step back and making strategic decisions under limited data and information in a very limited time period, like we do on corporate boards. So it became much more a risk management that actually running the company. And that was a very big shift for me. And, also as a lawyer, risk management for me is very important. So that change in the way that I approach things. And I also, appreciate, the way that management, sees the board, and how we see management during those, 4 board meetings a year. And, I'm very different about the way that I present to my own board now, because I know that in a very limited period of time, with very specific pre-reads, I need to get the buy-in from the board. And I know how difficult, from a risk management perspective, that position of the board is. And I'm very conscious of that.
Well, Diana, we were delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound.
Thank you, Alexander. It was a pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Diana Markaki. It was great to hear about her experience becoming an executive, translating that into the boardroom, and now what she has launched with what she calls the Boardroom, this, training opportunity, networking opportunity, connectivity opportunity for women executives in Switzerland. It sounds like a first-class space, and we heard so many of her tips today that we could all apply to how we should go about it in a very laser-focused way for our own boardroom career. Now remember, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to everything discussed in today's episode. And know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.